الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. It's a bit of a somber mood after the 23rd night, that we actually come to the realization that this month is coming to an end. And the even greater sadness that is it possible that I may not see this month again. It's something that if you think about, it's very difficult for somebody to absorb. Allah Azza wa Jalla has been so benevolent and merciful upon us and given us this opportunity that He is needless of giving us. Yet out of His grace and the virtue of Allah Azza wa Jal, He gives us this, another one of His subtleties and kindnesses that He puts upon us. What is more important? Getting results in this world or getting results in the hereafter? To attain results in this world, there are many roads to take. But attaining results in the hereafter, there is only one path. To get results in this world, I remember a television show where a young girl asked a rich man, she said, "How did you become so successful? How did you become so prosperous and rich?" He said, "Friends, family, and religion, these are the three demons that one must slay in order to be successful." So in other words, this person would step on everything just to get to the top. But with the hereafter, to get the results, there is only one way. And this is where our discussion is about, does the end justify the means? In other words, does the aim or the objective or the target that I have, does it justify everything I do in order to achieve this target? You have people called utilitarians, or a movement called utilitarianism. It's a philosophy that it's almost opposite to the way that Immanuel Kant used to have with his idea. It's an opposite way of thinking. See, with utilitarianism, the whole philosophy is about everything is only a way, but what's important is the final objective that you achieve. So the focus is always on what? On the results. And the consequences are what are important. And the way to get to these consequences, irrespective of this way being something that's considered moral or not, is irrelevant. What's important is the actual result. And this is a thing that a lot of atheists work upon. You know, the idea of John Stuart Mill's idea of the path of the least harm. You know, when they say, how do you achieve a moralistic objective in your life? Is by living a life where it causes least harm to the whole, to the community or society as a whole. So it's measured in happiness and pleasure and minimal pain. And basically they say everything we do is for a consequence. In other words, we gain an education, we learn in order to get a degree. We work in order to get money. We marry in order to have children. Okay? But we seek pleasure and we avoid pain. So the whole idea of thinking, the objective is what is the final result. Regardless of what I do, but what matters is the actual result. In Islam, We are absolutely against this thought. It's all about the means. Everything is about the means. Everything is about how it's done, how it is achieved, not about what you have achieved, or how you achieved it. And we're going to look at a statement made by Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, and we'll dissect it to point out this point about the means being as important, if not more important, than the actual objective. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, when he's questioned about the cunning and the cleverness, which I doubt it's not actual cleverness, but it's more cunning and deceptive ways of Muawiyah, and they tell him, well, Muawiyah is a bit more of a, this is something that Robert Gleave says, that in the University of Exeter, he's supposed to be the person that actually teaches Islamic studies. He says that although Amir al-Mu'mineen was the rightful Khalif, he says that he did not have the acumen to run a government, not as good as the first two. They understood it better. So in other words, what did he mean by this? The same thing that these people would say, that Muawiyah is more fit to be a leader than Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So Amir al-Mu'mineen replies by saying, Wallahi ma Muawiyah bi adha minni. They says that Muawiyah is not more cunning. He taban adha meaning he's not more cleverer. He's not cleverer than me. It's a bit hard to pronounce that. But he doesn't have the same cleverness as I. I have more cleverness. I'm cleverer. It's an actual word, but it's hard to pronounce. Than he is. But then I'll explain what he says after this. But let's look at this point of cunning. There's a book written by Niccolo Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli's got a book called The Prince. A lot of people read it. And Niccolo Machiavelli is probably, if you look in the English dictionary, there are more words made from his name than any other names that they've contrived words or derived words from. There's no one that has had an idea of thinking that he has. He is brutal. Niccolo Machiavelli is, if you want to look at someone that looks at results and getting results, he wrote the textbook for how a despot should rule. Niccolo Machiavelli, when he talks about things, he always tells you to perceive that you're dealing with humans, and humans are wicked and we live in a very bad world. So in other words, always have sort dhan. Always expect your people around you to be the worst individuals. Firstly, before we delve into this point, if we really lived in a world that was that wicked, you know when people get up and say Islam is a wicked religion, all Muslims are terrorists. Say, really? There's 1.6 billion of us. If we were really all terrorists, you think you'd all still be alive? We'd spontaneously combust in the street. He'd be walking every second, a Muslim would just pop, and everyone around him would get killed. If we were all that despicable, we're all that evil, and because people have access. Anyone can get an anarchist cookbook and make whatever they want and just go nuts. Anyone can go rogue at any point. 1.6 billion evil people. And if really the world around you was as wicked as we perceive it to be, then you really couldn't walk outside. It would be that scary. Niccolo Machiavelli, this is how we perceive people. So we had this concept of being a lion and a fox. He's called it the lion and the fox. The leader has to be like a lion and a fox. Now, when you talk about a lion, metaphorically, a lion is what? When you say someone intimately al-Asad, you're like an Asad, what does that mean? Does that mean he's hairy and he urinates to mark his territory? Now, when you say to someone, you're an Asad, it's like saying you are strong. You're a tough person. Nimr Asad, this person's an Asad, it means he's strong. someone that's got power. So a lion is someone with power, someone that has strength. At the same token, he says you have to be a fox. What do we say? A fox, as sly as a fox, as cunning as a fox. A fox is cunning. Fox is sly. Even the way a fox kills, the way that they hunt, they're just very cunning, the way that they operate. Everything about a fox. So in other words, he said, for you to be a successful leader, you have to be strong and you have to be cunning. You have to be sly. You have to be manipulative. You have to be deceptive. You have to contrive everything. You can't be someone, in other words, bring someone close and then stab them in the back. You need to be like this. This is the only way that you can rule. And this was the Machiavellian way of ruling. And like I said, the premise is that humans are wicked and that we live in a very evil world. Now, this is what Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying. He's saying that Muawiyah is not more cunning than I am. Because this is what he's talking about, cunning. Then he says, وَلَكِنَّهُ يَغْدِرُ وَيَفْجُرُ. That Muawiyah, what does he do? Yaghdur is he deceives, he's deceptive, he's treacherous. Wayafjur, he does indecencies. He is immoral, he commits iniquities. Now when we talk about immorality, you're talking about people that are indifferent to the conception of punishment and reward, will find many excuses for their actions. You know, for example, when you see someone, they tell you, listen, I don't fast. You tell them, why not? They say, listen, just gets too hot, can't handle it. Allah arafi, and he'll drink. Don't want to fast. And then you say, do you do qada? But look, he says, Allah arafi, Allah knows my situation. Now look for an excuse. Or you meet someone, for example, they commit a sin where they commit fornication or something, and then they'll come up with the excuse that this is permissible, this is the only way things could be done, what do? I'm single, I'm not capable of getting married, and this is the way I need to do things. They'll look for an excuse for every sin that they want to commit. And the same thing, they also look at a way to get away with it. You know, one of the systems they brought out when I was still in primary school, I used to learn about, was called harm minimization. They used to actually bring things in where they say, hold on, we can't stop people from doing evil, but what we'll do is we'll minimize the harm. Harm minimization condones evil. That's all it does. It doesn't minimize harm. It says, listen, now this is what they were saying. They said, you can still use heroin, but we'll just make sure the heroin you're using is cleaner, so you get a better hit. You know, in other words, we'll just make sure that you do something and you enjoy it more. So they condone this evil. So when someone says, hold on, I'm flirting with the opposite gender, but I'm flirting with the intention of getting married, it's still haram. It's still forbidden. If Allah Azza wa Jal thought this was a good way for you to get to know each other, He would have allowed it. If He thought that good would come of this, He would have allowed it. Remember one sister came up to me, she said, I met this young man, and this young man, he's a mu'min, he's pious, and he wants to meet me alone. I said, geez, that's an oxymoron. And she said, what do you mean? I go, your sentence, it contradicts itself. He's a mu'min, but he wants to meet you alone. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't, it's like a fish coming out of water. It just doesn't make sense. You're going to suffocate. You can't do this. This guy cannot be a mu'min and wants to sit with you alone. Because there's a rule that everyone knows. It's called khilwa, that if you're alone with the opposite gender and there is no aqd between you, the third one with you is the devil. And don't say I've got control over myself. You don't have control because God says you don't. Otherwise He would not have put these rules in there. He would not have applied these rules. Halal remains halal and haram remains haram. Yet people will attempt to bend these rules because they have an objective. One of the elders in our community, in the Lebanese community, this was a while back, I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago, he was trying to justify why they have those, those big bang weddings. The weddings where they have the dancing, the dabkir, the mixing, and, I'm not going to say which village that are known for them, but these villages, they're really known for partying. They're the New Orleans of the south of Lebanon. This is where all the parties take place. And he was of that village, and he wanted to justify why they have these weddings. And his justification was ridiculous. He said, we do this so we can give our children an alternative for nightclubs. An alternative for nightclubs. So instead of going clubbing, they come to these places, and, there are amongst Muslims, could you imagine what thoughts would enter this person's head, mixed thoughts? How is this Islam, and yet it has all the characteristics of something that isn't Islamic, something that's far from Islamic? And the funny thing is not this. How did he justify this? Was even, when they say, عُذْر أقبح من ذنب, the excuse was uglier than the actual sin. He said, for example, once in a South American country, I'm not going to say which country, he said they wanted to build an Islamic center and they needed funds. He said, so they held a rock concert and got one of the most famous singers in the country to sing. And from the revenue, they built the Islamic center. I said, if Allah Azza wa Jal wanted to fill the earth with his masajid and people calling to him, Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah can do this. If Allah wanted to do this, I said, this rhetoric is the same one that Allah talks about in the Quran. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ. When you told them to give of what Allah has given you, قَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَنُطْعِمُ مَنْ لَوْ يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ أَطْعَمَهُ. Allah Azza wa Jal, so when you told them to give of what Allah has given you, they'll tell you, should we give them of what Allah is capable of doing and feeding? Allah Azza wa Jal is capable of feeding everyone. There will be no poverty. Allah Azza wa Jal is capable of guiding everyone. But what's the purpose of the test? Could you imagine if Allah Azza wa Jal stops everything from happening? What's the purpose of the test? So the means in order to get this objective is what is most relevant. Even the idea of using unlawful money or making unlawful money to raise a family. See, Muawiyah's objective, his aim was always, to achieve his objective using any means necessary, be it lawful or unlawful. He didn't care for religion. He didn't care about divine punishment or chastisement. All he wanted to do was to maintain power at all costs. And his misstatements that he made and his concoctions and all these practices and all these deceptive schemes were all just to keep him in power. He was behind all those, the three main wars against Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Battle of Jamal, the Battle of Siffin, the Battle of Nahrawan. He was the mastermind behind all three. All he had to do was rile the people around them. At first, he got the ones that were nearest to the Prophet in using the wife of the Prophet, Aisha, and Talha and Zubair being companions of the Prophet to stand against Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the second one, he got the people of Sham and Siffin to stand against Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the third one, he got the Khawarij to stand against Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the Khawarij were members of his army. In every instance, he was the one that would deceive people. But then he got caught out in the second battle in Siffin. What happened? In the second battle, Ammar ibn Yasir was it was the pivotal point in the battle. He was fighting on the side of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And everyone knew that hadith that Rasulullah had said, and it was frequently narrated, that you will be killed by the rebellious faction of Ammar. So you'll be killed by who? The ones that are the heretics, the apostates, the kuffar, the unbelievers, the ones that are against, rebellious to what? To the faith, they will kill you. So when Ammar ibn Yasir came out, people were even, hold on, Ammar is fighting on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Eventually Ammar was martyred and he was killed. How would Muawiyah get himself out of this? Muawiyah turned around and said, hold on. He said that it was Ali that bought him and threw him against our swords and our spears. That he bought him, so he's the one that killed him. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, using that rhetoric, or what you're saying, then Hamza was killed by Rasulullah. Because Rasulullah bought Hamza to Uhud. Rasulullah bought Hamza to Uhud, so Rasulullah killed Hamza. The thought of it is just so ridiculous. How people can swallow this, how they can gobble this up is amazing. And I'll come to a story here. And this story is a story you've heard many times. It's a very important story that explains about the importance of the means, the way something's achieved. Al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He saw the people that would mingle with this man. You know how sometimes, these cults, how they actually formed, are like this. When there's a man that comes around, there's just something peculiar about this person. He always likes to have these secret gatherings. He's always hidden from people. You know those ones that whisper, the wind whisperers, the ones that rarely talk, There's always some magical aura about them. People always talk all these weird things about this person. And he's got his crowd, the people around him, they sit with him. And Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam goes to investigate this man. So he follows him. As he follows him, he notices the man comes to the bakery. And then the baker turns around and the man grabs 2 loaves of bread and he places them in a bag that he has with him. So the Imam says at this point that maybe that this man has already paid for these and then taken them. But then he said, why did he take them in secret? Then the man moves on to a man that's selling pomegranates, rummen. And he has 2 pomegranates, and the man waits for the guy on the stall to turn around, and he grabs 2 of these pomegranates and puts them in his bag. Then he walks away, and he's a sick man that he visits. He gives him the bread and the pomegranates. So the Imam comes up to him and says, Ya hada, I would like to ask you about your peculiar actions. And the man says, and who are you? And he says, I'm a servant of Allah. And I am from this peninsula. He says, exactly where are you from this peninsula? He says, I am from the family of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the man turns around and says, Idhan anta Ja'far ibn Muhammad. This is what the man says, Anta Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. So he knows who he is. He says, if you are that, he says, however, when you ask me about what I have done, he says, it's Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says to ask me about what I have done. To ask me about what I have done, being from such a noble family, or from the family of Rasulullah, Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Being from the family of Rasulullah, being from a noble family, to ask me for what I have done shows that you are ignorant, even though you're from such a good family. How are you ignorant? He said, if you read in the Quran, من جاء بالحسنة فله عشر أمثالها. Someone does good, they get 10 like the good deed. So you get 10 rewards of the good deed. He says, وَمَنْ جَاءَ بِالسَّيِّئَةِ فَلَا يُجْزَى إِلَّا مِثْلَهَا. But whoever commits a mistake or a sin will only get one punishment. So basically, if you do one good deed, the Quran says you'll get 10 rewards. And if you do one bad deed, you'll get one punishment. He said, I stole 2 loaves of bread and I stole 2 pomegranates. So thus I've committed 4 sins, so I'll get 4 punishments. He said, then I gave all 4 in the way of Allah to a poor man, so I'll get 40 rewards. So taking away those 4 sins, I will end up with 36 rewards. That was his response. So then the Imam says to him that it's you that is ignorant of Allah's book. If you read the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. That Allah Azza wa Jal only accepts from those that guard against evil. He said, you stole 2 loaves of bread. You stole 2 pomegranates. That's 4 sins that you've incurred. Then you gave these to someone. That means you dealt with stolen property without the permission of the owner. So you've incurred another 4 sins. So in total you have 8 sins. This idea is called the Robin Hood method, where people believe that if I steal from the rich and I give to the poor, it's acceptable. Or they'll come up with an excuse. You know, sometimes people hear when they do some shonky scheme and they say, oh, they're kuffar, we're stealing from kuffar. As if there's a law. Could you ever imagine historically, like Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who was he living with? He was living and he was surrounded by who? He was surrounded by idolaters. He was surrounded by polytheists, mushrikeen. Did you ever hear a story of Rasulullah stealing from these people? On the contrary, he was referred to as the honest and the trustworthy. At no point did they refer to him as a thief. Any of the prophets, did you ever hear a story where they were stealing from people? In fact, even when Allah Azza wa Jal shows where a prophet does something unbecoming of a prophet, in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, where he plants the goblet in his brother's saddlebag and then takes him, Allah says he only done this because we wanted him to do this. Allah had made him do this to take him by the law of the king. Otherwise he would not do this. So Allah shows where the exception is. For me to accumulate wealth in a way that's unlawful is something that is unacceptable. Regardless of what I think the final objective is. Regardless of how I think that this thing needs to be done. That if I think this is the only way it can be done. Otherwise, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, he would have said to himself, hold on. You know, one of the things that in the Qasid al-Kawthari for Sayyid Rada al-Hindi, one of the points he actually says, the poem is a very good poem, there's a point that's wrong that he actually says in the poem, where he says, لو لم تؤمر بالصبر وليتك لم تؤمر. He says, only if you weren't ordered to be patient, وليتك لم تؤمر ما نال الأمر أخو تيم وتناوله منه حبطر. أحسنت. That in other words, if you were not ordered to be patient, and only if you weren't ordered to be patient, that the member of the tribe of Taym is Abu Bakr would not have taken this. In other words, you're questioning here the command of Allah, the grand scheme of Allah Azza wa Jal. Or in the case where Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, when they told him, kill Abd al-Rahman before he kills you, he said to them, what? أَأَقْتُلُ قَاتِلِي? Do you want me to kill my killer? Do you want me to disrupt the whole scheme? The way things are meant to work, the way things are meant to happen? Inshallah, tomorrow night, we continue this hadith and then we look at the contrast of how Amir al-Mu'mineen dealt in order to achieve his objectives. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal not to make this the last Ramadan that we fast and we have these blessings and bounties in this month. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal not to allow this night to pass us by and we are left with even a speck that we will be accounted for. We ask Allah to hasten the reappearance of our master Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salli Allahumma ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.